When I was a little girl, growing up in Puerto Rico, I really wanted to speak a second language. Since I didn't know one, I made one up. I would write down words in Spanish on a sheet of paper, and then I would read them backwards out loud, because that sounded foreign to me. And then I could pretend I was living in the United States speaking in English. Then one day, when I was 12, my dad sat me down and said, "Oye, aquí, nos vamos a los Estados Unidos." "Hey, Kitsy, we're moving to the United States." "De veras?" "Yes, really." I was so excited. Finally, I would get to learn to speak a real foreign language. What I didn't realize at this moment was how much making my dream a reality would cost me. A year later, I was living in Florida, and I was about to start the middle of 7th grade. By this time, I knew enough English to get by, but my vocabulary was very limited. I still remember to this day the very first time I walked into the classroom, all the kids gather around me, asking to see my schedule. My what? Your schedule. Okay? Your schedule! I had no idea what they were talking about. But what I did know is that if I wanted to learn English quickly, full immersion was my only option. This meant only speaking English in school and not hanging out with any Spanish-speaking kids. At home, my dad spoke English to us, so we could learn it faster. My immersion plan worked. Within 6 months, I was fluent in English, and then you couldn't shut me up. But it cost me. You see, in my mind, I had shut my Spanish dictionary and tossed it in the back shelf to gather dust. Any time that I needed to speak Spanish, I had to go to the shelf, dig it up, dust it off, open it up, find the right words. This is too much work. It's just easier to avoid it altogether and just speak English. As the years passed, English began to feel like my native language. And I felt guilty for many years at just how poor my Spanish had become. Every time that I visited Puerto Rico, I felt like a stranger in my own country. And I just absolutely dreaded talking to family back home, especially my grandma. Every time we would talk, I couldn't find the right words. I would switch to English, and she would say, "Ay, Dito, se le olvida." She's forgetting. And I just couldn't bear to hear that disappointment in her voice when she said that to me. How did I let this happen? All I wanted was to belong, but it had cost me a huge part of my identity. This shame that I felt kept me from visiting Puerto Rico for 10 years. Finally, when I was 36, 2 of my grandparents died in the same year. While I was grieving their loss, I was filled with regret that my shame had kept me from staying in touch with them while they were still alive. Sadly, there was no time for that now. I had to put my shame on a shelf and brave a visit. These visits were bittersweet. On the one hand, I was grieving the loss of my dear grandparents who helped raise me for the first 12 years of my life. But on the other hand, I got a chance to reconnect with family that I hadn't seen in 10 years. And you know what? Once I dusted off that Spanish dictionary, I started to feel like I belonged again. These visits reminded me where I came from and just how much I had given up to get to this point in my life. And I realized at that moment that I could no longer pretend that Spanish and everything that that represents for me, the culture, the traditions, my family, aren't a part of who I am, aren't a part of what makes Kitsy, Kitsy. When I returned to the United States, I learned about the Spanish Bilingual Toastmasters Club that had recently chartered in San Francisco. When I heard that half the meeting is in Spanish, I thought, this is it. This is my chance to rediscover my language and embrace who I really am. American, Boricua, bilingual. Just as I had immersed myself fully in English when I first moved here, I now needed to immerse myself in Spanish. And it's working. Spanish doesn't feel like a foreign language anymore. And that dusty dictionary, it's right here. Front and center, right next to my English dictionary. It's human nature for us to want to belong. But when we do, we risk losing a part of ourselves, or as I did, suppressing it. But it's always within us. It took me 25 years to let go of all that shame and take steps to finally regain my identity. But what I have learned is that it's never, ever too late to pick up those pieces and make yourself whole again. Thank you.